Hi, everyone. We're about to get started, so just give us one moment. Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to Manufacturing in Mexico, What It Takes to Make the Move. I'm your moderator, Caroline Schmid. In today's webinar, we will be discussing Mexico manufacturing and give you an understanding of transitioning your supply chain to that region. We'll start out with a 20-minute presentation that guides you through the region with the experiences of our supply chain experts, and then we'll host a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to put any questions that may come up in chat, and we will answer as many of them as we can. I want to introduce you to our two experts, Benjamin Hopwood, Head of Supply Chain at Gemba, and Hugo Loria, Director of Production Central and South America at Gemba. Benjamin is a global leader in supply chain management across multiple global centers. Prior to joining Gemba, he was the Chief Technology Officer for Prenova Technologies and General Manager of Beckett Asia Pacific, with over 15 years of global product development, manufacturing, and supply chain. He is fluent in complex hardware product lifecycle development and is an experienced global supply chain diversification expert. Hugo Loria is a highly experienced individual in procurement and supply chain management, specializing in national and international sourcing, supplier, and product development. Hugo's developed factories in Mexico region for over 20 years, working with major retailers worldwide. Thank you, Benjamin. I'm turning it over to you to get started.
All right, well, thank you, Caroline. Yeah, so really want to thank everyone who's on the call with us today. We are Gemba, but what does Gemba do? If you're new to us, we are a platform that is made up of creators, of experts, and of manufacturers. And what we truly believe is that to create is uniquely human. What we want to enable is additional creation of products all the way through the product development journey, all the way from ideation through to design, validation, into manufacturing, and ultimately fulfillment, so that we can see products all over the world come to fruition. So again, we want to thank you for being with us. Again, my name is Benjamin Hopwood. I am our head of supply chain, and spoke with you guys. If you're interested, you can look at some of our discussion that happened earlier in January of this year. But oh wow, how much has changed just even in this year alone. But today we're going to be looking at Mexico. And so when we talked to you guys about this in January, some of the things that we talked about with regards to Mexico was that as a country, it was a unique destination where we see more and more people starting to look into it deeply, in part because of the trade stability that went on, as well as the proximity. And I think as everyone's aware in the room, just that with what's going on with logistics around the world today, especially with sea logistics, that there's a lot of discussion that's going on around that. But also there's been changes. So there's been changes on the USMCA agreement that happened, and we talked about kind of some of the cost competitiveness of the country as well as fast turnaround. But our thought was that we'd like to do a deep dive with you today, just to begin looking at what does it take to make the move? Because we've seen a number of trends that are going on currently in the marketplace today that we wanted to share with you, such that as you begin to plan for the rest of the year, as well as into 2022, where your supply chain will be based, we think that this will be valuable. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to get us started to Hugo, who's going to be talking to us first about some of the trade status of Mexico, and then also some of the products that we're seeing that are really starting to gain traction. So Hugo.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Hugo Loria, and I'm based in Mexico City. I'm the director of Central South America, and I'm gonna briefly tell you one of the benefits, most important on the USMCA trading. One of the things that we have noticed in the marketplace is that the USMCA, which is the current trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, has been developing fairly well. And Mexico has this treaty with free trade agreement from Mexico to the United States. And we also have several treaties from other countries in South America and Central America, the United States, where the tariffs will not be paid into the import duties into the US. So the NAFTA and the USMCA have developed the relationship between both countries, and is transforming our Mexican economy and trying to become global contenders and trying to produce as much as products and categories in the region. One of also the benefits that we have currently in Mexico is the location that we have next to the US, and the logistics that are very, very important these days with the costing of the logistics of the products and components that we send into the US. Especially the companies that we're touching base in the US do benefit with several issues. One of them is that the companies can go into Mexico and visit the factories on site with us, and then get back again to the US into the same day. Logistic-wise, we have also seen that as containers from East Asia are racing, Mexican manufacturing on site, wherever we can get the goods out to the US, are at least 60% less than East Asia. And trucking freight from Mexico to the US is 90% cheaper. So that comes down into having better costing of landed goods in the US. One of the major points also is intellectual property. As some of the products that are made in Mexico, we have a big and strong reputation protecting the intellectual property within the USMCA agreements. And the IP is covered right up to 70 years. In contrast, East Asian countries have frequently separated this issue, and these can lead into problems with the clients with counterfeits and having problems and issues that are raising court informants with the US right disputes. And if we can go ahead and go into the regions, these product categories that are gaining traction in Mexico, these are driven by consumer goods, and these are the regional core business of some of the categories that I'm mentioning. Most of the consumer goods that we're currently prospecting in clothing, jewelry, shoes, leather goods, textiles, furniture, and handcrafts are done in the states in Mexico, which is on the west of Mexico. And up north, we have regions that do medical devices, plastic manufacturing. And on the other part, we also do metalworking and denim and also textiles in northern Mexico. So those are the product categories that we are strongly currently doing with customers at Gemba. And I know that we can foresee developing these categories along with some others that you guys have on hand.
All right, well, thank you, Hugo. So as I mentioned, this year has really been an interesting one, and certainly Mexico has seen change as well. But what are some of the things that we're seeing on the ground in Mexico? Because again, there's been a lot of groundswell around what would it take to get out here. One of the first things, and again, you guys may be aware of this, but we've been seeing significant bullwhip effects that have gone on. If we were to kind of rewind the clock here to last year in the middle of third and moving into the fourth quarter, we saw that a lot of the Mexico factories actually shut down because of COVID concerns that were ongoing. Once they ended up opening up, and they did open up and remain open to today, we ended up seeing a large amount of draw on materials. And obviously with what was going on in East Asia, that ended up leading to shortages that once we started to draw on that. And this has really been across multiple different product categories to where we're seeing subcomponents and actual raw materials in very short supply. And ultimately where this is leading to is pricing uncertainty among the manufacturers. Uncertainty around getting the materials, and then uncertainty about trying to predict out. That said, this is not affecting all of the product categories, but it has been seen in quite a few. The second one has been with regards to logistics. And obviously, this has been one for anyone on this call who is shipping from places like East Asia, where you may have seen prices, say $4,000 per container, and now are seeing prices, $17,000 to say $25,000 for things coming from East Asia. This is a real concern. And it's not one that's just about price, but it's also one of actually getting on the ship, as many of you know. This has been an area that Gemba has been working very closely with our partners, both in East Asia as well as Central Asia, as well as in Central and South America, to resolve. And we have some really cool solutions for our clients, but we know that there's a lot of pain going on out there. And how this has affected Mexico is that in their subcomponent supply, this has become a real issue. Because both the raw materials, the out of the gate manufacturing, there's still a lot of subcomponents that are coming from East Asia when you get into it. And in some cases, these are things like raw fabrics. It can also be the subcomponents, but ultimately the delivery of those components has been thrown into a certain amount of uncertainty that then also leads to uncertainty in areas that can include things like tooling as well. And so out of that, there's been a cost differential that's been added to it that's come as somewhat of a surprise, I think, to a number of people that have been going over to Mexico, because I think that there was an assumption among many people that, oh, well, we can just go to Mexico and that will result in a lower cost simply because of things like logistics, without understanding that still the actual supply chains right now, both for Central and South America, as well as for many other countries, are now deeply entwined with East Asia. On the positive side, though, we've seen a number of trends that are encouraging, though, as well. One of the big ones is on the currency exchange. And so while right after the epidemic got started, we saw the currency start to go significantly in favor of the USD. Today, we see that to a similar level that we've seen in previous years, and or slightly to the positive on the USD side. The second one that we would look at would also be labor costs. And so labor costs have actually maintained their competitiveness. As a note, we would look at a competitiveness of about 25% over countries like China today. In our previous discussion, and you can go back to that if you'd like, you can also look at India and Vietnam pricing in this area. But for Mexico, they've maintained that quite well. Then the third one actually comes from the additional enforcement that's coming in place with the USMCA. And so a lot of that, or one of the big pushes in that area, was for more transparency among the subcontracting that was going on in Mexico. And so for you as a client, if you're looking at starting to go out to move products over there, there's just a lot more transparency going on today if you had ever worked with Mexico in the past. But one of the other areas that I really wanted to talk to everyone on the call about is what we're seeing with the product journey and with complexity, because we have a number of people that come to us, and if your experience in Asia has been primarily there, especially in China, a lot of times it's something where you can actually take a relatively a loose type of design sheet, and you can go to a number of Chinese companies, especially, and you can end up finding white label opportunities where you can go and you can change certain things, whether it's color and logo, in some cases actually even feature sets, and you can work with groups on that side. On the Mexico side, this is a little bit more of a complicated journey. And part of this goes to the fact that the supply chain right now is so intertwined with the East Asia side, but then also goes to the area of the different product categories, and really looks at, or really is influenced by the overall maturity of the of the actual product category in Mexico. What we find is that certain product categories and areas like, for instance, cut and sew are actually quite mature. And so for you, if you're looking at Mexico and if Mexico seems like the right place, we can actually go to manufacturers across the country, and we can bring relatively loose design sheets and actually get that all the way into a finished product and shipping. That said, in other product areas, we actually find that this is significantly different. And as such, it requires a more deep product journey, requiring both designs to be done, things like bill of materials and full design sheets. And for some of you, that may not be an issue at all, but I know for some of you it is. The second thing is then when we're really looking at bringing up manufacturing, doing the right validation is really important. So part of that validation, oftentimes called sampling, is going through a tooling process. And one of the things that I mentioned before was that we're still seeing a lot of hard tooling that's coming from East Asia. So this is a key thing that you'll need to be considering in the overall timeline with products that are produced in Mexico, is that for cost reasons, many times the hard tooling or the best prices coming from hard tooling will be from groups that are still connected to East Asia. And that will then add another 6 to 8 weeks over the common time of, which can be 8 to 13 weeks, depending on the complexity of your product. And on that note, just with complexity, as a note, we have the 2 to 13 weeks here. I realize that that's a huge range. Well, part of that is because we're looking at how much of that material needs to come from overseas. And even if you're on cut and sew, what we do find is that oftentimes these are materials that are being imported, depending on the specificity that you have for the product. But that it can also be something where if it's locally sourced, that it can be a much faster process, and or if it's in the inventory of the manufacturer. But that's a real key area that you need to account for as you go into this. The second one that can be really affected by this is your overall ramp time. And so from a ramp rate standpoint, if your entire bill of material has been localized into the Central and South America region and or North American region, what you end up seeing is that the ramp times are much faster. In a previous life, I was involved in a lot in the electronics side of it. And for those of you that do electronics, you know that the localization of your components is incredibly important in terms of for the ramp side of it. And this influences both cost as well as how fast you can get up to your full high volumes. The final one, though, and definitely a positive, is on the logistics side. And this certainly is one that we see that goes much faster than many of our other regions, with the exception of, for instance, the US and or Canada. But there's already a very developed logistics network, both through sea as well as through trucking. And more recently, we're seeing a lot of our clients doing trucking in this area. And so this is somewhat of a unique journey. That depending on your product, there are options open to you to either do, for instance, your hard tooling in these regions, like in the Mexico region or North America region, which will save a lot of time, but will incur higher costs on the tooling side. The second one is taking the time to really look at your materials that are going into that and making sure that they're localized. And if you do that, then we see significantly lower costs. But going into the final part, just to kind of wrap up here, and we will be doing a Q&A afterwards. But some key considerations as you think about your product journey from Gemba's standpoint. The first, and probably very obvious to us, maybe obvious to you, is that there is a definite trend towards Mexico manufacturing. We're seeing kind of a groundswell in terms of organizations that are looking to make the move and trying to understand what will it take to get from where we are today to a place to where you can be in manufacturing in an area where it's much faster to get materials once they've been produced. With that said, as mentioned in the previous slide, we would really encourage people to be looking deeply into your bill of material And the reason for that is because for organizations that have not done this exercise, you will find things that will extend your product journey significantly if you've not brought them into consideration. So one of the things that we do at Gemba is that we actually bring our manufacturers in very, very early on whenever we're doing product creation and design. And the reason for that is because we want to know what's in mass manufacturing for them. What are the products and the materials that they or subcomponents and materials that they can bring on quickly, such that we can get you into production fast. The final one is that I would encourage everyone on this call. While I think that there will be significant movement towards Mexico over the next couple of years, that this will take a long view. And this is an area that the Gemba really excels in, is helping to make planning for organizations to begin talking about what are the interim steps that are necessary for you to begin making the journey to potentially right shore your product, to get it. If you have groups that are in North America, how do you get product actually produced in this area? Well, the first one is that oftentimes what we find is that there's a production ramp that has to go on in your current manufacturing, which then allows you to bridge into the next step, which oftentimes is bringing on existing products into a new manufacturer, for instance, in Mexico. And in this case, what we see significant amounts of subcomponents that are already being done at your existing groups, and then starting to mix that with localized components that have been found in the new target market, in this case, Mexico. And then finally beginning to have a view to say, okay, once we're getting our subcomponents and raw materials, then how do we make the full localization journey complete? And in doing that, oftentimes it requires really getting deep into your supply chain and looking at what are the sub-suppliers that we can bring up to speed in these new markets. Because in areas like Mexico, and we've seen it in places like Canada and the US as well, is that what ends up happening is that once the assembled materials or the assembled products start to be reshored, one of the big things is that you also have to build out your subcomponent groups, because those subcomponent groups have also moved overseas, and it requires a much larger volume for that to happen. So what we do is we start those conversations early as well with the subcomponent manufacturers to give them visibility so that they know that these are products that are being moved over. An example of this would be, like, for instance, in tent manufacturing. So on the cut and sew side of it, there are a number of materials that are coming from East Asia on that side, but there's also a large number of materials that are open to you that can be produced here in the Americas. But that said, once you start going into the aluminum side of things, then you start to find that actually the production moved very, very heavily over to East Asia. And so these are areas that Gemba is working on with subcomponent suppliers to actually get them up to speed, as well as with the actual raw material groups, such that we can see additional product categories opened in this area. But yeah, but again, here at Gemba, we're really excited about seeing products created, and part of that is really getting to hear from you, your questions that you have, as well as thoughts and ideas for moving into the future. So with that, we're going to go and move into a Q&A session, and I'll turn it back over to Caroline.
All right, we have a lot of questions to get through, so I will get some highlights in here. Somebody's asking if they are currently manufacturing items in China, but they're having logistics issues with delays in our replenishment. Is there a manufacturer in Mexico who can replace their current manufacturer?
Yeah, so I would take this with kind of two steps. The first one is to ask you the question of why are your logistics experiencing delays? Part of that may be cost, but the other thing that we've seen with quite a few of our clients is that it's difficult for them to get the actual containers moved. If that's an issue for you today, we would be happy to talk to you about some of the solutions that we have for actually getting it moved. It's costly, but if you have specific shipments that you need now, and you just know that you need them, we can help you to unstuck your current supply chain. The second part of that, and as a note, we will be doing a webinar in the next couple of weeks on that, but I'd encourage you just to give us a call and we can talk about it. On the other side of this is then beginning to look at Mexico in terms of how do we do the transition. What I would say is that our expectation right now is for the logistics challenges that we're seeing today, that we do expect that to continue. I think probably you've heard it from other groups as well, but that this is likely going to continue deep into the 2022 side of things. And so kind of the more optimistic folks are saying, well, potentially after Chinese New Year's, we may see a change on that side. But I think at least for Gemba, we actually do expect to see this continuing on into the summertime of next year. So with that said, then the question becomes, what will it take to actually find the manufacturer? For us, oftentimes this is first a discovery process that can really help you to just see who's out there in the marketplace. And Gemba is different than other sourcing groups in this way, that we just have a very transparent service cost for us to go out to find manufacturers and then to come back and tell you what we're seeing in the market with regards to pricing, and then to put you in touch with them. We don't put commissions on things, and we don't have additional monies that we're making off of your production, because we really believe that it's important to go ahead and get information out. So that's what I would say the first step would be, and that can be done in kind of a 2 to 4 week period. In certain cases, with certain products, it takes a longer period of time to really get deep. But again, for us, a lot of what we do, we want it to be a value add, and such that for as much time as we're adding value to you, we're happy to be with you in that product journey.
All right, thank you. There's been a couple of questions that are regarding manufacturing in Mexico for small businesses. Is there something that you can talk to more about what it would look like for a smaller business?
Yeah, Hugo, would you like to take that?
Sure. One of the things that I welcome that kind of questions is that regarding small businesses, Mexico is very open on the MOQ side. Mexico will cater smaller amounts in comparison to the ones done in East Asia. So I know that there is a big business coming into Mexico from those type of lower volume customers into the market, and that would still be done at a faster pace and trying to reach the target cost that the customers would want.
Yeah, and just to add one additional addendum to that, again, but we try and talk straight with you. And so one of the things that we do see though, so Hugo mentioned that these lower MOQs are pretty important. And he mentioned previous to this that one of the big things is that you can actually be boots on the ground very, very quickly with almost all of these manufacturers. And so you can just be sitting across the table, actually talking to people, working this out. And I know for many small business owners, that's a really important thing. And that's something that we see many of the Mexico manufacturers willing to do. The one area that I think for a number of our groups that they have found concern with has been suddenly, sometimes when you end up getting quotes back, you'll see really large MOQs. And that's almost always a dead giveaway that there's manufacturing material that's coming from overseas, that's still located in the East Asia or other regions. And so this is where then we can dive in to go ahead and identify, are there alternative materials that can be used to get you into production faster and to have more flexibility, to be more agile?
All right. There is also a question regarding other South American countries, what the difference between sourcing in Mexico versus other countries in the region.
I can tackle that one, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I know that both are strongly recommended. I would believe that the only issue with South America, the South American countries are within in a separate free trade agreement, but they're still feasible for your market. I would believe that it all comes down to the category and product that you want to develop. And we can accurately do the quotes for both, from Mexican market and from South American countries. And it also, the cost is an issue. because I know that from South America, the logistic cost would be a bit higher, as this is tending to go by sea freight into the US or through Mexico. And the logistic cost from Mexico would be faster, as mostly this would be done by regular trucking from Mexico to the border.
Hugo, would you also be willing to just speak to just what are some of the product categories you see, like as an example in Colombia right now? What are some of the areas of expertise there?
Well, the areas of expertise in Colombia per se is mostly on textiles. They're very big in textiles. Also, women's leather goods, leather accessories, shoe manufacturing, and non-leather shoes also. They're fairly similar to the shoes that they are done in León, Guanajuato. But I know that Colombia is very competitive and very fast forward oriented in fashion and do multi-styles in their market.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I believe we actually have probably about 30 more questions here. There's a lot of you that are asking specific questions about certain materials or certain industries or products. We can certainly get back to you post this webinar session with answers for that, because we want to make sure that we're able to respond to everyone. But for right now, we are at time and we're going to end the session. But thank you so much for your response, and we will try to get back to everyone that had a question during these sessions, and we appreciate your attendance today.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Really, really do appreciate it. And as Caroline said, please just reach out. We'd love to talk to you about this in depth with your product in specific, just with a lot of specificity around that. So we really do look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you.